Aloha everyone, and welcome to Up Your Game, XR and the Evolving Fan Experience. As you can see from that short reel, there's a lot happening in the XR space in sports right now, and I'm super excited to kind of dive into all the details of it with this panel. We'll talk about the impacts of COVID, key learnings from actually deploying these projects, and we've been promised super solid future predictions that you can actually make your stock picks from this panel. So. Self-intro, my name's Jason Yim. I'm the CEO of Trigger, the mixed reality agency. We've been doing XR for 10 plus years, 200,000 plus hours, and 200 plus deployed projects. We work with sports brands like Nike and Adidas, lots of teams and leagues, so the NHL, FC Barcelona, Cowboys and Rams, and then also super lucky and honored to actually work with this amazing panel. So we have Devin Fox. She's the Director of Digital Platforms and Innovation at the PGA TOUR. We have Scott Stanchak. He's the Vice President of Emerging Technology at the NBA. And then last but not least, we have Nico Charles. He leads the XR partnerships for product innovation at Verizon. So we'll kick it off. Elephant in the room, of course, is COVID. We've all been through this. The whole world's been through this in this past year. Moving into the second year now. So obviously there's been a ton of impact on the sports side and in the sports industry. We're all aware of the event cancellations and, keeping fans out of the arenas, but I'm sure there's a lot more effects that are maybe less publicly known, but also equally impactful. So I would really love to hear from all of you panelists on how technology and how specifically XR was used to adapt to all these issues. So maybe if we could start with Devin.
Sure. First of all, thanks so much for having me on the panel. I really appreciate it and honored to be with such a great group of industry people. And to answer your question, we had been building and preparing to launch 2 XR experiences prior to COVID, an XR leaderboard and standings type of experience with Trigger Global, and an XR audio experience with Bose. Both were really purpose-built to serve fans during live competition. So when COVID came on strong and tournaments were canceled for many months, we suddenly had to place all of those projects on hold because without the tournaments, there's actually no live data to power them. So when live competition was resuming and we had sorted out all the protocols that we needed to begin being on site again, we released some of those projects. And it allowed fans to view, the first one that I mentioned, the AR Leaderboard, allowed fans to view a 2D up-to-date standings and player cards, live weather information, and real-time leaderboard in an XR environment, basically using only a smartphone browser. And during the non-tournament times, we leaned heavily into the launch of our PGA Tour 2K21 game and worked to build a little bit of buzz around that, which really isn't XR related, but still a very important part of what our efforts were at the time. And I want to go back to XR for a second here. We completed a web-based AR experience that we did with the World Golf Hall of Fame. During that time, we found some of the most interesting pieces of headwear and hats that we could possibly find in the museum. And we worked to build volumetric captures of those objects that we would be using in a web-based, like long-form digital editorial type of experience. One of the folks on our editorial team had researched the hats to understand what the significance of them was historically. And once they had that information, they ended up building that into the long-form experience. It was actually a really cool way for us to combine like a standard historical editorial with a volumetric capture technology that allowed us to reach not just our core audience who would be more interested in the historical significance of the hats, but also a younger, more tech forward crowd who's interested in the technology of like volumetric capture and AR experiences.
Great. And one question, like, did this kind of happen organically after COVID, or was this kind of a directive from above? Like, how did the pivot happen?
Well, I think the cancellations or the pausing in the project work happened really as a result of COVID. But the work that we had been doing on the hat project had started just around the same time that things were kicking off with COVID in the United States. So we just dug right into that and kept moving because we knew we didn't need any live data to power it. And that was going to be one of the things we actually could release.
And Scott, I mean, we've seen a ton of stuff with the NBA. I mean, of course, like the bubble, but amazing things that you guys are doing with, the video wall for the fans and stuff. Could you talk a little bit about the tech solutions because of COVID?
Yeah, Jason, thank you for having me as well. Good to be on another panel with you and Devin, and to meet you, Nico. For us at the NBA, I think it really accelerated a lot of the technological advancements that we had been exploring. We not necessarily were exploring the fact that no fans would be able to go to the arena, but we knew that 99.9% of NBA fans will never set foot in an NBA arena. And so how do you create experiences to allow those fans to feel closer to the action? And with COVID, it became 100% of NBA fans could not go to the arenas. So one of the modes that we started to put in place, as you mentioned, was the boards, which we called Together mode. They were these 17-foot tall, 10 sections that had 32 fans in each section, and the players on the court could see the fans. The fans would see the action in real time and could cheer on. They had hype men sometimes in some of the sections, but it helped make at least a feel inside the bubble that there was actually were fans there, because that's a big reason for the NBA players to play and feel that energy. And so that became a really big statement for us. We had President Obama, Jason Tatum's son, LeBron's I Promise School. They were all part of this experience over the term of the hiatus return to play. Additionally to that, it's always about how do we continue to enhance the game experience for fans. So that could be everything from offering alternative commentary. We did betting casts during this return to play. We did Google Lens executions for the WNBA when the draft had to be completely remote, to adding the shot clock on the top of the key so fans could see it directly on the court rather than in the lower third at the bottom of the screen. And so for the NBA, it's continually trying to experiment, find new ways to engage fans, whether they're in the arena, outside the arena, watching on a telecast, or engaging with that telecast with things like co-viewing. Those have all been things that I think we've been exploring for a long time, but knowing that community was missing the community of being in the arena, it really accelerated what we wanted to focus on.
And then similar to the question with Devin, it's super interesting that COVID accelerated all this innovation. Was that innovation then super structured from above? Or did they say, hey, let's just make a ton of bets right now, see what spaghetti kind of sticks on the wall? How was that organized internally?
Yeah, I mean, I can remember being out at All-Star, walking around with the hand sanitizer in my pocket, and from just the amount of people that you meet then. And now I look back at it and I'm like, yeah, that was the starting point. I can even remember sitting in a conference room when I came back from All-Star with my team and saying, this is going to be a 30 for 30 one day. We're living through something that is going to change. And I want to say back in December or so, we really started exploring ways that if something was to happen where fans were not going to be able to go to games, how can they feel like they're cheering from home? And so that the virtual cheering, which we rolled out, where fans could tap on their screen and it would increase a cheer meter. We did for the NBA, the WNBA. We saw millions of cheers per game. And what was surprising as easy of an experience as it was with just, again, tapping the screen and without necessarily a payoff, you saw that fans wanted to feel like they were part of something. And some of those taps were represented with visuals in the stadium or the arena in the bubble. But for the most part, you just saw the passion that fans just wanted to feel a part of something. And they knew that they were, one of millions that were tapping their phone at that time. And so really it accelerated innovation across the league, and some of the things we were thinking about already, and some of the things we had to start from scratch on. But I think all across the board, up and down to Commissioner Silver down, it was everybody was willing to try new things.
Great, that's awesome. And Nico, your thoughts definitely with Verizon must be, on a systems level, how are you driving all this for all these big customers?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for having me, and great to be here amongst such prominent XR leaders in the space. You mentioned driving, and that's a metaphor that I'm going to use and sort of beat into the ground, which is imagine if like when COVID happened, the way we sort of saw network activity change was, instead of everybody using the highways to drive to work or to get wherever they need to go, suddenly everybody is on all roads all the time. Highways, byways, back roads, paved, unpaved, and think of every aspect of the network being used for everything and anything from calls to text to video streaming to XR. Just the sheer volume of network activity went up tremendous amount for everyone, and it really was unprecedented. The XR component of that is that, really to echo what Devin and Scott have said, is it wasn't just a willingness or a greater willingness to look into XR solutions for education, for remote work, for healthcare, for training, for collaboration, and many others. It was a recognition that XR solutions could really help with these enormous problems and challenges, but also a sort of a demand for innovation to make it real, and to move it from an R&D exercise into what is real that we can implement today, tomorrow, immediately. And I would say as the pandemic moved into its sort of slow grind phase of everyone realizing we're going to be there for a while, that demand really just grew for innovative solutions, and the recognition that these changes of everybody working from home, who would have thought that your business, whatever it is, could really function and be fine if everybody is working from home. Not that everyone's is, but that as an exercise was just an eye-opening experience for many, to say that, yeah, these crazy circumstances that we're in, we can overcome them, and XR is potentially the shining light for AR and VR solutions to bring these experiences to where people are. Really, from the Verizon perspective, across all areas, productivity, entertainment, sports, other areas as well.
Especially commerce, yeah.
And I definitely think that it's not just a glimpse in recent history. It's like all this behavior, all this appetite, everything will stay post-COVID. All this learned and all these solutions that worked, this past year and then this year are just the beginnings of solutions that will evolve moving forward. We're not going back to the old way for sure. So. But that's a great segue into the next part, which is about the solution side. So we've seen the value of XR across many things, right? We see longer and deeper engagements than other digital media. We're seeing big conversions in shopping and e-commerce. And of course, it's a new way to kind of consume content for people. Can you guys discuss what other use cases that you are finding that are super effective in your organizations for XR? And maybe Scott, if you start with this one.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we're, you said it just before, we're not going back to the way that things were. And I think this was a moment in time that forced everyone almost to reset, right? And it forced technology on people who maybe weren't thinking about using technology for something like working from home to seeing that all this is possible, right? The amount of time saving that people have in terms of their commuting hours versus the amount that they get done by not having to commute. For us, especially at the NBA, I think one of the, and this relates to COVID, is the self-isolation that people feel, not just with the COVID situation of being quarantined, but on top of that, thinking about even just the live game experience, as I mentioned before, of not going to an arena. And where we've seen really good success, especially with something like VR, is with the Oculus Venues experience. We've seen the uptick in sales of VR headsets over the last year to a point where you couldn't even buy them late in the year towards the holiday season. And those community experiences where you feel like, you're turning over, you see someone else's emoji sitting there and you can communicate as you're watching that same live game. We saw a really good engagement, even in terms of sometimes those games were surpassing the average time spent than people had on just traditional league pass and mobile or linear TV watch times. And so I think it'll be, you even think about the home office, like VR is VR the home office or the work from home solution, so people feel like they're connected to individuals who are maybe in the office or out of the office. But I think that aspect that I hit on at the start with community and creating experiences like that are going to be extremely key based on what's happened over the last year and a half.
Yeah, there's some really surprising results. We have my wife has a friend who they worked on a VR exercise kind of app, and what they found during COVID was the number of like elderly users, was like the main user base for their app, whereas like they would never have imagined that before. So there's adoption that's happening in places that you kind of never would have predicted. So
right, and I mean, look, I think for a while it seemed like VR was starting to tail off as AR was taking off and starting to become more prevalent. I think it maybe slowed the downturn on VR, but it's we're getting this merge of a number of technologies that are coming together in one place. But even before, where I mentioned about 99.9% of NBA fans can't go to NBA games, and just based on location, we're a global sport. But on top of that, the number of people that go to arena, it's like 99.9% will never sit courtside. And so you have the ability to be able to bring that experience to fans. And if you do it the right way, and as these form factors of glasses start to shrink, and 5G allows those things to shrink because of battery and connectivity, I don't know if VR is a place that we're always gonna that is going to be, you're gonna live in it 24 hours a day. But I think it has an ability from an entertainment standpoint to add significant value. And I even liken it to what Devin does at the PGA. It's like, there's nothing like standing against those ropes and watching these guys hit, a 350-yard bomb, and the sound that happens off that tailor-made club that drives it perfectly down the fairway. Like to the number of people that can experience that, like technology is getting to a place that will immerse you in that, and everybody can feel that energy.
Can I just add to that? I think that right now we are in we're in a moment in time where VR and AR are separate technologies, and we talk about them differently, and we formulate strategies about them differently. But it's going to be it isn't going to be very long before those two technologies converge, and your headset, your glasses, your contact lenses, your whatever will have sort of a fully immersive mode that'll be reminiscent of VR, or one that is aware of your surroundings in AR mode. And I guarantee in if we all gather in, I don't know what the time frame is, 5 years, 7 years, we'll look back on the AR VR separation as a nostalgic footnote. Remember that time when we talked about AR and VR as separate things? That kind of recollection.
And Nico, do you have any other use cases that you want to cover that you see super effective in XR for you?
Well, this is more of a sort of general capability than a specific use case. But I would say that 3D is out of the bag. People are really starting to, or the industry is really starting to recognize that 3D holographic content, however you describe it, volumetric content, holographic content, 3D content, that notion of an object, a scene, or a person that you can experience, interact with, or manipulate in full 3D. You can walk around, you can interact with, you can annotate. That's gone from being an R&D sort of science fiction concept to now becoming more and more mainstream, certainly in sports with the idea of 3D live streaming or being up close and that sense of presence. I would say, even a couple of years ago, that was still a concept that a lot of folks hadn't quite understood what the impact of that will be. But we've seen those experiences in a number of settings, obviously in sports and entertainment, in the commercial space, and we're just, I think we're just beginning to understand the impact of that. For example, if you have a sports star that you've captured, and whatever they're showing you or performing or doing, the concept that they can be in your living room, on your desk, standing on your kitchen island, that's mind blowing. Whether in a sort of tabletop diorama mode or full life size, I can have the sports star that I've idolized all my life right there, almost pixel perfect. That's really going to change how we build experiences, and how personal they are and how relevant they are to our own environment and space. And I think we're just beginning to scratch the surface there.
Yeah, about that, letting 3D out of the bag. It was funny. I was watching Star Wars, A New Hope with my kids, and the Princess Leia hologram coming at a R2-D2. That's all fuzzy. My daughter's like, "What is that?" And I was like, "Oh, that's just an AR Princess Leia. You could blah blah blah, like the apps that Daddy does." And she's like, "Oh, okay, I totally get it." So it's funny that she needed this present day thing to understand this old school Star Wars special effects. So anyway, sorry. Devin, what about you? Any great use cases?
Sure. I think for us at the tour, we really wanted to prove that we could use our live data to power a web-based XR experience. I alluded to this in the previous question. We had previously seen success in releasing a data-driven live sports AR kit experience to the App Store, but we weren't sure if we would be able to replicate something similar or use our data in a similar way in a web environment. I've seen a lot of web XR experiences that are super cool, very visual, really creative, super inspiring. But for me, integrating the live sports data and displaying that in as close to real time as possible was kind of a next level thing for me personally, and something that I wanted to prove that we could do. And so for me, in my mind, once we prove the hard stuff, then we can focus in on, the beautiful golf courses and the beautiful experiences and all of that. So we pulled our proprietary ShotLink competition data and player data into the WebXR experience that we worked with you guys at Trigger. And it really allowed us to knock down some of the barriers for our fans who really don't want to download another app on their phone. Maybe they, don't have enough space, or maybe they are over, a cellular network and have turned off the ability to download on Wi-Fi or something. But we were able to do that. And, we saw when we compared the usage of the web experiences to what we were looking at on the app experience, we did see an uptick in the usage from that experience. And so for us, that desire to break down that app barrier for our fans really paid off. So I expect to build more for web in the future for that reason.
I'm 100% in line with what Devin is saying. I think that the web AR experience, like, we know that this is not the ideal AR format, right? Imagine watching a game with stats all around the screen. Like, you're not going to watch it like this at that point. So web AR versus native, web allows you to create these experiences with much more cost effective, allows you to do it much more quickly. And just in terms of being able to not feel certain constraints from the different operating systems that you have to deal with. Web allows you just to get to a place where you could start to get learnings as quickly as possible that will inform what you think that experience is going to look like in a year or 2 years, whenever that perfect form factor comes out. And so I'm 100% in support of and in agreement with what Devin said about web AR. I think that's where a lot of the experimentation should be these days.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think removing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nico.
I was just gonna pile on there. I think we're all in agreement. WebXR is the future, and while it's still a little easier and more capable to do things in an application, we all have to be on that WebXR train. Frankly, when my folks saw what Devin, you guys did with live data in a WebXR environment, they were all freaking out, saying, you can do that now? I thought you could only do that in an app. What? And they immediately went to try and figure out what are the tools and APIs and things that are available. And we have to, it is the future for all of us. We have to keep pushing it, even though it's messy and hard to do right on the edge.
Yeah, I think I just want to add, like, one of the funny pieces of technology that I think that is rising because of COVID, that's, I think, totally related to web AR and like removing that friction, is QR codes.
Yes.
I feel like the US adoption of QR codes was so low, and then now because of COVID, you get your menu from your QR code, you scan this and that for whatever check-ins, like that's now going to be built into the kind of US behavior, and then that, of course, is a great enabler for web AR. So jumping on to, I think it's great that you guys are bringing up all these examples that you've done. Like, I think it would be great for the audience to kind of learn a little bit about what experiences, what are your key learnings or practices that have come from this, like from actually building and deploying. Like for us, we definitely find that doing this for so long, it is a very iterative process. It's trial and error. You have to be very targeted towards your fans and not necessarily, just creating technology for technology's sake. I think one key learning that we have at Trigger that we found is that deployment is equally as important as development. You don't want to spend all this time, months, even like over a year, building something and then not have it properly deployed. So how's it going to be marketed? What are the call to actions? How are you going to onboard people? That's all equally important as well. So it would be great to hear from you guys. Like how did you guys land on the right solution, and any insights from that process? Maybe Nico, if you could start.
Sure. I guess what I would say is, and this is something that I think we need to say and do for quite a long while, is just to continue to recognize that AR, VR, XR, mixed reality, whatever you want to call it, that the vast majority of people out there still have not experienced or interacted with these technologies, and that we need to think about this as introducing people to a new medium. And if you think about XR as a medium, then we as creators, as distributors, we have a responsibility to introduce people to a new medium in a kind and gentle and positive way. And this might sound a little silly, but if I'm introducing somebody to a VR experience and they've never experienced VR before, don't put them on a roller coaster or in a horror movie or in the jump seat of a fighter jet, unless you plan on giving them a bucket and a clean pair of pants as well, and expect that they're never going to put on a VR headset again after that. We need to be cognizant that we're not just introducing people to our content experience, whatever that might be, but to the idea of this new medium of VR or AR or whatever. And I think it's going to be a while before we can step away from that responsibility and assume that sort of most people or a critical mass of people will have experienced it. Certainly the Quest 2 is helping, given its the success in the sales there, but we're still a long way from that sort of mass market understanding or intro to that medium. So to your point, Jason, I think we have to think about our experience and how can we do it the best, how can we deliver it in the best possible way, but also recognize what can we do for that first-time user, whether it's at a location where we have people on site who can take you through it in a kind and gentle way, or it's an unboxing experience at home, or they're using their phone to activate AR in some way and they've never used it before. Just put some thought and effort into that notion that you're introducing somebody to a new medium.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like right before COVID, we were in London working with some museums on some VR stuff, and their previous stats were super surprising. Like the 95% of the people that had gone through their previous experience had never done VR before, and that was like a first time run. Another thing that I think is great, to your point, is that we found some success in retail where we're using XR and AR, but we're not promoting it as such. It's from a QR code. It's just the benefit, like learn more about a product, and the user's going to go use it and find it very useful, but they weren't aware that they're entering some AR, XR, emergent tech thing. They were just trying to get the answer that they wanted at that moment in the kind of purchase funnel. So cool. Sorry, Devin, do you wanna go next?
Sure. I think for us, the one thing that we've learned is that you really need to be choosy about when you use XR. I feel like you mentioned earlier, technology for technology's sake. You have to really have a reason to use it for a fan experience. I think in sports in particular, like doing something for the sake of doing it doesn't really serve our particular fan base well. And it's expensive to do sometimes, so it doesn't really serve us well either if we don't have a real value proposition for the fan. So we're really focused on that value and like what value can the medium bring to the fans. And really for us, we always try to start with the hardest thing first before creating any kind of like, pretty like fluffy type of pieces using the technology. We've got a range of fans from kind of older, more traditional fans to younger, really tech forward fans. And so when we think about using XR, we're either targeting the younger tech forward audience, like in the example of the AR Leaderboard that we did with you guys, or our AR app from a few years ago, or we're trying to target both groups, as in the example of the AR long form editorials that we've done for both the President's Cup a couple of years ago and the hat story that I mentioned earlier in the conversation. So even in, I'm thinking back now a few years, even in the live VR experiences we did back then, like we were really purposefully trying to create views of the most iconic holes in golf that you literally couldn't get anywhere else. It wasn't a view you could get on the golf course. It wasn't a view that you could get from a hospitality seat. It was even stuff you couldn't see on the network telecast. So for us, if you don't have an additional value for the fan to experience, it really isn't worth doing. And by value, I mean just bringing something new that they really haven't seen or experienced before. So just be thoughtful about how and when you're using XR. And if there is no new or additional value for your fan or for your consumer, then maybe a more traditional method of like sharing your content or experience with the fan would be better, and you could maybe save yourself a little money too.
I think you know the earlier stuff you talked about on the data side too, like that idea of value being like there's two separate chunks, right? There's the value of the user experience, having them something different, but then also there's like what does XR plug into, like your whole, you know, your data sources on the other side of that, and that value changes as well. Like that's progressing and evolving over time as well.
Yeah, the visualizations, exactly. The visualizations that you can do in an XR environment are so different than what you can do on a, you know, on a website or in a mobile app.
Great. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, this is, you know, we're heading towards the next computing platform shift, but really this is also a new content format. And I go back to when I was at the New York Times and we did the, you know, million Google Cardboards out to all home delivery subscribers. And one of the most engaging experiences was someone on the needle at the top of the Freedom Tower, and you put the cardboard on and you can look all around. Like that's a perspective that you're never going to get anywhere else. Now we could have at the Times written a story about what it's like to work at the top of the needle on the Freedom Tower, but to be able to experience that allowed us to use a different content format. And that progresses into even my work at the NBA and the work that the team is doing here. It may have started as novelty where we work together on dancing foam fingers, and most people don't even realize like the dancing hot dog was AR, but like when they realize it, then they start to think, well, that's AR, like how is that valuable, right? But it's entertainment and it's going to lead to something different. When the NBA did Pop-A-Shot, where you could place a court anywhere, basically, we saw people sending us screen recordings in the middle of the ocean or in front of the Eiffel Tower playing Pop-A-Shot. My now 9-year-old son, I think, was 6 at the time. He couldn't make a basket, but he could make a physical basket, but he could make a basket using the phone. And so, you know, then even to what we did with AR portals and being able to take yourself into experiences like standing in the locker room as the Warriors are celebrating their championship, or DeAndre Ayton getting called up to the you know, with being the top pick in the NBA draft, and you're on stage as he's walking up to shake Commissioner Silver's hand. Like those are all different formats that allow you to experience that content in different ways. And I think that's the question that most companies need to ask themselves is, what will this look like in an immersive world? We know stats today can be on your computer screen showing a shot chart, or we can do something where, you know, you're showing all these numbers, but in the immersive world, you have an ability to put that in a perspective where you're seeing it, you know, just an engaging, really deeply engaging experience that's taking that format and content and doing it in an extremely unique way. We experimented with Magic Leap, and that was one of the big things that I thought were some of the bigger learnings, was really trying to see what those different presentation of statistical content could look like in a world where everyone's wearing glasses. And so those are just where I think from a content perspective. Then on the other side, you start to think about what these different platforms and companies are doing. I think what Google, you know, they're one of the best positioned in terms of the fact that like they have text search, they have audio search, and like visual search is really the next big thing, where you just look at something and you can identify it, or that can lead to some progression of I'm looking at the menu in an arena and I could just tap a button or tap the air and it orders that item for me. And you're seeing that companies like Google are investing and fully invested in technology like visual search and AR search, with them putting that button on their search screen, which is such valuable real estate for them in that product. And so I think we're just seeing, this it's still a little bit novelty, but it needs to shift to utility. It's difficult, again, in this format, but I think we're going to get there. And that's where that experimentation now, to give you some type of learnings. You're not going I wouldn't, read 100% into any of the learnings today, but I would look into it enough where you could say, if we're in this future state, how do we set ourselves up so we can move as quickly as possible to be ready for that future platform of, let's say, wearing glasses.
Great. I think that's a great segue into the last segment for us, which is like, what is this kind of near-term future? There's a bunch of technology that's kind of emerging right now. There's LiDAR, there's multiplayer, there's skeletal tracking, visual positioning systems, and cloud anchors and things like that. For us, I mean, we are most excited about, using, of course, 5G, but tying into AI backend systems to either just bring more kind of utility and more power to the AR experience versus just playing animation and things like that. Like, what do you guys see coming up in the near future? Devin, if you want to start.
Sure, I got two real quick ones. The first is that I'm expecting / hoping to see some really easy to use no code XR experience management systems that people like us can use to deploy things really quickly and easily, kind of similar to the content management systems that we now use to deploy content to our websites and mobile apps. Just something that brands and consumers to use to get their own stuff out there without really having to push an app update in the app stores or deploy a bunch of code to get something done. And the second one is related to LiDAR and sports betting. At the tour, we're currently working on a closed proof of concept for the upcoming Players Championship in March. And in that proof of concept, we're going to be using LiDAR and various other technologies to demonstrate like longer range displays of like live XR overlays on fan devices. And I say long range because our courses are extremely large when you compare them to normal venues like basketball or football or whatever. So long range just covers the, sometimes hundreds of acres we have to be looking at. And so that's why I use that term. Overlays we're looking at building are built to enable both at home and at venue golf type of betting scenarios, really enhanced by the physical space, both at the golf course and at your home, as well as integrating our ShotLink data, our live data, and other types of content like live video. So we're working with a company called Quintar on that, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how the worlds of sports betting and gambling really start to intertwine with XR and what those experiences will start to look like. And I'm hoping that we'll start to see experiences like that emerge in the next year or so.
Okay, Scott, what about you?
Yeah, I think we're going to start to see this convergence of all the technologies that 2 or 3 years ago started to come out separately. Things like VR, AR on the phone, voice products, AI, the infancy of 5G. And Nico's going to love this. I mean, 5G, I think, is what's going to help all of these technologies come into the next great computing platform shift. There you go. And that's because it's going to shrink the batteries. It's going to make connectivity so much quicker. And you think about it, if you're wearing glasses, you need that connectivity to be as quick as possible. Teslas today with the self-driving, they're constantly reading what's going on the road. You're driving 80 miles an hour down the road, or your car's driving you 80 miles an hour down the road. Like, you can't have latency at that point, as it's recognizing, is that a deer in the road or is it a shadow in the road? And so you need that connectivity. And think about, even in the context of, in a simple, not life and death situation, we're at a conference, I walk up to you, Jason, I don't know who you you are, and we're talking for a minute, and then your LinkedIn info pops up on the screen. It's like, that didn't really serve as valuable. And so I think we need connectivity to be so deep, so fast at that point to help us with this next platform shift. And when you went from desktop computers to laptops to phones, it was all about connections and being able to stay in touch with people and your community. And today, essentially, there's two moments in a day where people are so scared to not have their phone on them. And you're not supposed to use your phone when you're driving and when you're in VR, because you're closed off from the entire world and you can't pick up your phone and check those text messages that probably don't matter that much to what's going on. And so I think we're just getting to this place where we have to think about what is this going to look like? We have an idea of what it's going to look like. We need the technology to catch up for us to be able to make that shift happen. But I think, as I said before, it's going to be the convergence of a lot of these technologies that people are using in the home today, and just shifting them, combining them, and shifting the content format to create something so much more beautiful than exists today.
Well, can I just say, Scott, you're hired, because I think you've mentioned 5G way more than I have in this, which I'm probably going to get a talking to as a result. But absolutely, once 5G is ubiquitous, it is going to be that catalyst for XR experiences, that enabler with that low latency and edge compute and bandwidth to really make a lot of what we dream about XR being able to do a reality. And if I can just add I know we're close on time here. I believe, and Scott, you definitely touched on this, that spatial experiences or experiences that are related to your immediate environment are going to become more and more relevant and significant. Whether it's you go to a location and that venue, there are content experiences that you can unlock because you're at that place, or what Scott mentioned, if you're in a vehicle or with walking by with people, visual search, getting contextual information coming up about this person, about this place. Or it's creating a game or a sports environment that is layered on your immediate environment, and it understands your living room, and this is a solid object, and that's a cat, and you react in the appropriate way, having that information. Those contextually relevant, immediate environmental surrounding experiences, and that's a terrible way of putting it all, I think is going to be a driving factor. The LiDAR sensor on the iPhone is just the beginning of the understanding of your environment there.
Yeah, and I'll add, I mean, the interesting thing, especially with the future, like I look back to, when I was a kid, and I think about the number of questions that I have, and it could be very important questions, or it could be the most mundane question, and how immediately I will get an answer to that question because of this, right? And like, what did I do, 15, 20 years ago when I didn't have that? Like, I didn't have a list of all these questions that I was always wondering and waiting till my parents drove me to the library so I could look them up. And so it's already expedited that question answer and feedback loop there. But now the next platform shift has to make that even quicker. So is that, before you think of the question, or as you're thinking of the question, you're getting the answer? What does that look like? And so I think it's going to be, we're living through an amazing time. The acceleration of technology is happening so much quicker than it ever has before. But that's one of the examples I always think back to, is like, what did I do with this? Like the number of questions I had in my head years ago.
So yeah, I think we're kind of out of time. I do want to thank you all. Thank you so much for joining this panel. I think one of my key takeaways is I'm going to start wearing a name tag now, because someone I consider my friend needs 5G and like AI and to see my LinkedIn before they recognize me on the street. So Scott, thank you for that. I'm a little bit hurt, but now I know the truth. So, you know, I'll move on to acceptance. Anyways, some other key takeaways I think I hope that you, the audience all got today was one, of course, you know, how COVID impacted the sports industry and how XR and other technology was used to hopefully mitigate some of that impact. How 5G and AI and kind of big data kind of delivered through XR is going to be kind of changing fan engagement. And then hopefully, you know, pushing towards a bigger mass adoption. And then I think the general key to success right now, it's still early days, you know, it's amazing technology, but it's still trial and error right now. And again, we're building on the learnings, and some of the learnings today might be very different from the future, but a lot of it is going to be relevant, and we'll keep adding up and building towards a more accurate solution for everything. So, but thank you all again. And thank you for everyone watching. But again, thank you so much to the panelists and our guests today. Thanks, Devin.
Thanks all. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.